Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon to talk about uh, family and community voice and the COVID relief for education. My name is Tom Hudson. I'm Executive Director of the South Carolina School Improvement Council, and I'm also a co-project director for the Carolina Family Engagement Center. And we are bringing our resources together today to look at the federal funding for COVID relief and perhaps answer some questions that you folks might have in your roles within your school community. So just a couple of little housekeeping items as we go forward. If you would please keep your mic on mute until we get to the question and answer period. And also, if you would please type your questions in the chat, and we'll save all those questions until the Q&A time at the end of the presentation. And if the number of attendees we have today is not too large, we're going to ask participants to also type in their name, their role, and their affiliation in the chat. So please go ahead and do that as well, so we know who's with us today. And also, the program will be approximately 1 hour, but we'll have South Carolina School Improvement Council and Carolina Family Engagement Center staff and presenters available for an extra half hour after our time together to answer any questions that we were not able to get to during the program. So again, thank you for being with us today. And we'll talk a little bit about school improvement councils. The SIC role in informed decision-making. We're very fortunate in South Carolina to have things such as school improvement councils, which are there to provide that family, educator, community member, and student voice in terms of making decisions or helping to make decisions for the school. They work with the principal and the other administrators there to help primarily look at helping them to meet the goals set in their 5-year school improvement plan. They're there to do so many other things as well. So they are broad-based and they're ready to provide input into items affecting the life of the school. SICs are also a representative of their school communities. We've got over 1,100 SICs across the state right now in our K-12 public schools. And through them, there's a unique linkage to the greater community and to other stakeholders in the life of the school and the district. Of course, some primary school improvement council roles include providing input and feedback on school strategic improvement plans and the yearly updates to that, to assist the school in implementing various improvement activities, of course, monitoring, reporting on school progress toward those improvement goals. So your school improvement council can be utilized at both the school and the district level. There are a number of districts across the state who have utilized SIC officers or representatives of each SIC in their district to serve as sort of a sounding board or advisory body for the superintendent and the district leadership. So we have some districts that really embrace that in terms of utilizing their SIC resources in that superintendent's advisory board capacity. And so as SICs are used to inform decision-making in such areas as school strategic plans, school opening plans, facilities plans, and so on, providing, organizing input on the expenditure of federal COVID relief spending is really just a logical step in terms of the advisory role that they provide within their school. So that's a brief overview of what SICs can do, what they're there for. And I'd like to turn it over now to Felicia Robinson-Jones, who is a parent and an SIC chair for Belton Middle School in Anderson District 2. And she's going to talk about some of the important roles that parents and community members can play for informed decision-making at the district level. Felicia, thank you for being with us this evening.
It's my pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a product of Mr. Dick Riley's Education Improvement Act. I have clear memories of the excitement and buzz created when the EIA was announced. Our high school's teachers and school staff were showing enthusiasm and constantly talked about how we were about to undergo groundbreaking change. One of the most expansive memories I have about this time is that we talked. Everybody in the school talked. Teachers and administrators talked to us about the foundation of the EIA, but most importantly, we were asked for our feedback. This in turn created a verbal contract that we all wanted to do our best and reach the standards of excellence that had been given to us. Most importantly, though, through it all, we, meaning the students, teachers, staff, parents, and community, talked. That experience, my parents' constant call to always be involved, as well as becoming a mother late in life, have heavily shaped my philosophies as a parent leader. I always end each of my SIC meetings with the African proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child." The pandemic and its especially devastating effects on the traditionally underserved communities have made activating the village critical to educational success. Our SIC found the following items to be important to reaching those that have fallen through the cracks and those that typically go unheard. Those stakeholder keys are listening, meeting people where they are figuratively and literally, flexibility and creativity, use what you have, don't recreate the wheel, and finally, create the vision and share it. Whenever I think of listening, Mr. Dick Riley comes to mind. To reach the stakeholders of the EIA and get his bill passed, he made the continued extra effort to talk with people to hear their individual personal stories and actually listen to the information that was shared with him. I remember as a freshman at Furman University encountering him on the way to class and how he initiated a conversation with me. And we ended up walking the same stretch every day with him just talking about life and taking in all that I shared with him. It is that type of active listening and steadfastness that creates new horizons and encourages people to open up and share. With those interactions in mind, throughout the year, I have randomly spoken with students and parents throughout our city and asked what their thoughts were. I was able to gather some wonderful creative ideas and also able to plant the seed that those people's opinions mattered, as they are very important cogs in the educational wheel. One of the best plans at our SIC brainstorm covered all of those components. Realizing that most people were not out and about as they normally would be, we found that many of the churches in our community were still having services. Those churches were also staying in touch with their members and communities with various programs, such as food giveaways and things of that nature. We hatched a plan to use social media to contact the churches and invite them to be a part of our school community by connecting with us and helping share information with parents, caregivers, guardians, or anyone that may have trouble receiving information electronically. I sent letters of introduction to the community churches via Facebook Messenger and invited them to be a voice for their community. This was followed up by phone calls from our principal, and we both mailed letters to those churches that were signed by the principal and myself. To gauge how well our project worked, we held a drawing that was facilitated by the weekly social media update from our principal, and it featured prizes from our community business partners. We were able to engage over 130 people and generated further excitement by having the prize drawing on Facebook Live. Our ultimate goal is to create a community network of leaders that we invite into the school periodically to better understand the unique needs of their community and formulate a plan together to meet those needs. In the future, we plan to draw on our creativity, flexibility, and vision sharing by having listening lounges at community grocery stores, gas stations, convenience stores, and the like to capture the people that typically do not respond to emails and social media. Activate your village by simply spending time in it. Share your vision in clear, relatable terms. Make it easy for everyone to talk to you and share your successes to encourage people to join your vision. In closing, please continue to share with our stakeholders that their voice, is critical to the successful use of ESSER funds for the schools and their communities. Nelson Mandela said it best when he said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." I can add to that by saying, education and learning is the light that shines on the path forward. I look forward to seeing each of you on that path as we start a new era of education with the help of ESSER funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jones. That was very well said, and provides a good segue into our next presenter, who is Ryan Brown. And we want to welcome him from the South Carolina Department of Education, where he is the Chief Communications Officer. And so we wanted to give you just a little overview of what we're thinking in terms of the importance of stakeholder engagement and feedback, and how SICs and parents and community leaders can fit into that. So now we kind of want to turn to some of the information that will help stakeholders make informed, give informed input and feedback to the kinds of decisions that are going to come up regarding the expenditure of ESSER funds. So Ryan.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Tom, for putting this together and inviting us and me in particular to be a part of this and to cover briefly the large amount of money that has come into our state for K through 12 public education as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. The input of families and community members and the expenditure of these funds is paramount. It's critical. You know, we have the opportunity to make some long-standing impactful changes to public education in our state that we've never had the funding to do. So spending it wisely and spending it on programs and initiatives that move students' academics and their social and emotional well-being forward is very important. So I'm briefly going to try to cover what is 3 very large programs, really focusing on 2 of them in a short amount of time. For the parents that are on here, I would just want to apologize because there are so many acronyms in education, and you're going to see a lot of them on the slides I'm using. In the overview that Tom and Karen gave, obviously here we're talking about the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. It's a mouthful, commonly called ESSER. And there are 3 different pots of ESSER that have been allocated to states at 3 times over the past year and a half. The first pot, which we call ESSER I, came from the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That amounted to a little over $216 million for South Carolina public K through 12 schools. That was signed by then President Trump on March 27th of 2020, came really into the state in early April, and was predominantly used to reopen schools. We paid for face coverings, we paid for sanitation equipment, training teachers, things of that nature that really was used to really get our schools reopened. Almost all of that money has been expended. I think as of today, about 70% has actually been spent, with the remaining amount encumbered, so meaning it will be spent very soon on things. The second pot, which was much larger, almost 4 times as large, ESSER II, that was signed on December 27, 2020. That is from the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, another mouthful and another acronym to remember. And that amounted to just over $940 million, so almost $1 billion in additional funds. And just to kind of put that in perspective, within our K through 12 schools in all 81 school districts within a normal year, we get just over $1 billion in federal funding to cover all of the different federally required education programs. So we're talking, we've gotten more than twice just in 2020 of what we normally get. So the ESSER II funds, which that along with ESSER III is really what we're focusing in on today. And for ESSER II, districts are in the process of submitting spending plans to us, the Department of Education, that we will approve, and then they will be able to draw down that money. I think as of today, about 45 districts had approved spending plans, with many on the way. Not much of that funding has actually been spent. I think about $10 million. So of that almost $1 billion, there's a significant amount of money that is available. And finally, ESSER III, which is the most recent and as you can see, much larger pot of money, over $2.1 billion from the American Rescue Plan that President Biden signed on March 11th. We have given, the feds gave us a 2/3 of that money up front, and districts, state and districts have to submit plans to the federal government to draw down the remainder of those funds and ensure that we're using it correctly. And for the purposes of parents and families, the ESSER III funds, because of how much money it is and the required public input, which we'll get to in just a minute, is really what you want to focus in on. But of course, the ESSER II funds, I mean, those together, are over $3 billion. So we have within South Carolina, within the last year and a half, almost less than that, $3.3 billion in federal COVID-19 education-related funding. So a huge windfall of money. So going back to what I was saying, we have the opportunity to do some really great things. And South Carolina was positioned very well economically. We had a very large surplus that eventually dwindled down, but we are not having to use these funds in the ways that many other states are, in that they're having to fund their schools because they've had such significant cuts. And South Carolina has not been in that position. When we're very lucky, our funding has remained, at the previous fiscal year's levels. So if you want to go to the next slide. So $3.3 billion, 90% of that funding flows directly to school districts. So you see in the chat here, there are some links to ESSER II and ESSER III. You can see exactly how much each school district got or is getting. And that is in relation to Title I, Part A, how much they received within each fiscal year. And for those not familiar, we're essentially talking about enrollment and poverty. So the largest school districts, Greenville and Charleston, are receiving the largest amount of money. The smaller school districts are receiving the least, but poverty is factored in there. So those with higher poverty levels are receiving more funding than those that are not. With the 10% set aside, which is what the state is allowed to hold on to, we are undertaking state level activities. So with the ESSER I funds, we bought a ton of PPE, plexiglass, things that helped us reopen schools, things that helped keep our school bus fleet moving and kept it clean. ESSER II and ESSER III, we're looking at more long-term activities to support teachers and students in their academics and their mental health needs. So you see a little bit of difference in the state's approach there. But the most important thing about ESSER III, not only that it requires public input, but districts actually have to spend, the federal government has told them you have to spend a minimum of 20% of your funding on activities to address learning loss. And not only do you have to address it through those activities, but those activities have to be evidence-based, meaning that they have to be proven to be effective through data and research to be effective and actually going to do things. So you can't just go out and hire your cousin's backyard program. You actually have to have proven strategies, and that has to be written into your plan. Here at the bottom, you'll see some of the percentages that the state has to use. And these relate to ESSER III. It's a considerable amount of money, over $216 million that we have to use on interventions to address learning loss, summer enrichment, and after-school programs. And then there's a little bit more flexibility for overall state needs and just the administration of the program. I can tell you, because I am overseeing the public input, We're very interested in that. If you go to the front page of our website, ed.sc.gov, there's a place you can provide us input. Our plan is due to the feds much sooner than school districts have 90 days. We have until June 7th. So we are moving very quickly, where school districts have a little bit more time to talk about these funds. So if you want to go to the next slide. So allowable uses, and I've listed some of these here, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I tried to highlight some of those that I thought were important. There are 15 allowable uses. Again, you can visit those links on the side of the screen here under ESSER II and ESSER III to see exactly what those are. Just to kind of touch on a couple of them, you can do any activity that you generally get federal funding for. So IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, special ed programs, Perkins, which is career and technical education programs, adult education and literacy programs. This money can be spent on regular federal education programs. You see mental health, you see purchasing technology, and two at the bottom that are particularly important to South Carolina and to our agency are school facility repairs and improvements, and then air quality and upgrade projects as well. And as many of you know, we have some schools in our state that date back to the 50s and the 60s that are in desperate need of repair. And being able to make improvements to those, and in some cases, the feds will allow us to build entire new facilities if we can justify the cost, presents a particularly innovative option for South Carolina. But you can see the full list of those programs by visiting those links on the side of the screen. So public input, as I mentioned before, it is critical, it is required. And school districts, you're going to see begin to engage their school communities over the next several months on the use of these funds. And of course, we on the state level have done that as well. Unfortunately, we weren't allotted the same amount of time as school districts, but we're going to continue that throughout the 3 or 4 or so years that these funds are available, so that we can constantly be adapting to what the needs are. But here you see who some of the stakeholders are that the federal government's named, your usual students, families, teachers, educators, administrators, and school staff. We also have to engage particular audiences if they are served by our state and served by school districts. So tribes, we do have some in South Carolina, not a huge population, civil rights organizations. Those are going to be represented in nearly every community and on the state level. Disability rights organizations, again, every school district serves students with disabilities, and then stakeholders representing certain interests of student populations. So districts have a lot of legwork to do. And if, of course, I think everyone on here represents families and teachers and educators, but certainly if you represent one of these particular stakeholder groups, it's important for you to have a seat at the table. And we want to see school districts do a good job in reaching out to them. But I think it's important for school improvement councils, parent-teacher organizations, community organizations to not even wait for school district to reach out to them. I would be proactive about it and go to them, because they really need to get this input. They need to hear from you and the community as to what the needs are. And certainly here in Columbia, I know we sometimes think we know what all the issues are and we have all the answers, but I can guarantee you we do not. So we always want to hear from you as well. So that really covers what I wanted to speak with you all about. I know that's a lot of information to try to digest in a short period of time. I've watched some of the staff here at the department try to give this presentation in 2 hours. So it is very detailed. There's a lot of nuances, and it is moving very quickly. And that is a good thing, that there's a lot of funding available, but it's so important that we use this money wisely. And here at the department, we're hiring staff that are going to be monitoring and overseeing and auditing districts to make sure that this is carried out appropriately and it's not wasted. So that's our promise to you all. But certainly, I think it's important for communities to be proactive and engage on this topic. So again, thank you for inviting me, and I'll stick around for any questions.
Thanks so much, Ryan, for being with us. We really appreciate you taking the time, and that was a great sort of introduction to what we've gotten used to here, calling ESSER I, ESSER II, ESSER III, but I know sounds like just a bunch of letters and numbers if you haven't been immersing yourself in this stuff, which I don't think most people have been. But that was a great, very easy to understand summary. And so I would encourage anyone who has questions, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the session. But if you want to put any questions in the chat to make sure we don't miss them, please feel free to do that. And I actually come up next, and I'm only going to speak for just a couple of seconds because I really want to make sure we have enough time to hear from Terry Peterson. But I would just emphasize again, and I know Terry had actually the department has some good web pages on their website that give a lot of information about each of the types of ESSER funding, ESSER I, ESSER II, and ESSER III. And so I would encourage you to look at those. And I think Jennifer's going to put in the chat the direct links to those lists so that you can look up and see exactly how much money your individual district is getting according to that needs-based formula that Ryan mentioned. And I really want to thank Ryan for his comments about not waiting for an invitation to the table about this. I think that, as Ryan mentioned, there are a lot of deadlines coming up on this in terms of needing to submit applications and plans, and those deadlines are relatively quick. As he mentioned, the state has to submit their plan by June 7th, I think, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but I believe the deadline is August 24th for the ESSER III for the districts to submit their plans. And it's unfortunate this, in some ways, that this is happening over the summertime because especially after the very stressful year that teachers and parents and students have had in school, I think everybody's ready for a break and they may not be as focused as they might be on this issue. So I really would encourage you all who are part of either community groups or SICs, because community groups can also be instrumental in helping us gather feedback in terms of needs and priorities. I would not wait for your district to reach out to you. I would reach out to them and ask them, what is their timeline for making decisions about ESSER II and ESSER III funds? Have they already, submitted their plans for ESSER II? Is there still money left that could be used in ESSER II? And then ESSER III, when are they planning to submit their application, and how can we help you reach out to a broad cross-section of families and community members and teachers? And so one quick note, I wanted to just briefly mention the importance of viewing this ESSER decision-making through an equity lens. And I think that there's a lot of language in the different statutes, sometimes requiring, sometimes encouraging, but there's an attempt to really focus attention on those subgroups of students who have really been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And I have some of them listed here. These are some of what we call at Carolina Family Engagement Centers, our families of focus, but you might also think of others, for example, grand families who may not be very computer literate and may have had trouble navigating technology, or who may not have access to technology despite all the efforts to provide and supplement that technology to folks. So just wanted to highlight the importance of that, and really the role of SICs and community organizations in serving as a bridge between those communities and the district. I loved the story that Ms. Jones told about how Governor Riley was present in the community and engaging all kinds of folks in conversation. I think that's something that we all need to do more of. And I think that SICs and community organizations, especially at the local level, who serve some of these subgroups can really be an important link and really help create that sort of two-way dialogue between districts and families. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terry Peterson. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about dreaming big and thinking about some of the possibilities given the amounts of money that the state has received and how we can think transformatively about using that. So Terry.
Good evening to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you. What's unusual in these funds is the size, as Ryan described and Karen described. They really do need public and educator and parent input. But what's unusual is these ESSER funds are in fact supposed to be used in a major part to expand, start up, and improve summer and after school opportunities and partnerships to help young people recover from the pandemic, re-engage, and really accelerate their learning. And what we have, and very unusual, is a survey was just completed across all 50 states on this very topic. It's only done once every 6 or 7 years. And here's what we found in South Carolina, that tens of thousands of families without a child in a summer or after school program would enroll their children in a summer and or after school program. But they need to be accessible. They're way too expensive in many cases. That's why having them linked to schools is very important. They need transportation, which makes it linked to schools very important. And the hours need to match their work schedules. Another part of the findings was that here's what parents really want in summer and after school programs. They want the opportunities to build life skills, excite kids about learning, reduce risky behavior by engaging them in other positive activities, build positive relationships, and keep kids safe and out of trouble, and help working families. Keep in mind this list, because you're going to see in just a few minutes almost the exact same items come up from the guidance of how to use these monies. Now, a little more specificity. I know Ryan did a great job in explaining all the jargon, and I'm going to lay some more on you, unfortunately. But in all these monies, just from the third big pot of money, the ESSER III money, there is $380 million locally flowing to our schools just for the purpose of addressing learning loss. There's other funds for the school day as well, but 20%, 380 million. It's so big I can't even say it. And in this provision, the law specifically calls out implementing evidence-based summer learning, summer enrichment, and comprehensive after-school programs. There's another 148 million also set aside at the state level. So this is the guidance I was mentioning. So the parent survey had nothing to do with the guidance. What I would hope that someone would have looked at what parents thought, but in the guidance for the use of these monies, look at what's on the list. Include enrichment opportunities that support social, emotional, and academic development. Yes, you can include tutoring and homework, but that does not constitute a summer enrichment or comprehensive after-school program. You need a broad array of activities, and the guidance suggests some of these. STEAM and STEM programs for older students, career and technical programs, physical fitness, health education, and arts programs. And the staff and programs need to focus on strengthening and building relationships, and they need to be inclusive and support families. They should be free and include meals. Remember, the one big hurdle keeping young people and families from participating in summer and after school programs is the lack of transportation and the costs and safety. And you can address them right here with these ESSER III funds in your school community. The terms and money get so big, it's hard to get a focus on this. So not every school is going to have this, but many higher poverty schools across South Carolina will have, just for this purpose, of summer enrichment and after-school programs, $500,000 to $800,000 over 3 years. Bigger schools and schools with more students in poverty will have more money. So you can think big, and you can do it without a 50-page federal application. Certainly you should have a plan. So think about in your school community and in others around you, how would you use $500,000 to $800,000 over 3 years to really make exciting summer programs and after-school programs with a lot of community partners, with interested teachers involved, so young people would want to attend, and that would really help them catch up, keep up, and accelerate their learning. A lot of people ask me, so what are you talking about? I maybe haven't seen any of these. I fortunately get to work around the country and including South Carolina, so I get to see many, many fabulous summer enrichment and comprehensive after-school program. Let me give you just a few examples. There's a very successful summer enrichment camp that partners artists and musicians with K through 5 teachers for 4 to 5 weeks. And together they teach reading, math, social emotional skills, and arts learning. By the way, the kids in this program beat every other reading and math program, even though that is not the focus only, and have the highest attendance. Another program right here in South Carolina, STEAM camps, operated or helped managed by Engaging Creative Minds. Young people in Charleston and rural schools throughout the state use local artists and musicians with scientists and teachers, and together they develop STEAM activities and literacy activities for 4 to 5 weeks and get tremendous engagement and results. If you want to go big or go home, as they say, you can do what Savannah is doing. I just found out about this. They're getting the whole city of Savannah. This could be done in any city or town. They got everybody who possibly does anything related to young people in the summers and are working together to basically create a portfolio of 25 or 30 opportunities across Savannah involving all those groups. After school, boys and girls clubs here in the state and across America not only do their typical activities, but some of them offer career and technical courses after school for credit. Why couldn't some of our high school after school and summer programs do dual enrollment and youth apprenticeships, not just during the day, but actually after school and summers, which really helps a lot of young people catch up and keep up. The South Carolina After School Alliance has a great, interesting career program with health providers. Wings for Kids, started in South Carolina, but it's all over the country. It is a terrific program. So as you're thinking about doing something new, different, exciting, and engaging, look at some of these websites. There's the first one from the Summer Learning Association, includes award-winning summer programs from across the country. You might get some ideas there. Likewise, in the after-school space, the After School Alliance has many examples of exciting, engaging after-school programs. So what happens if your dream is too big? Well, actually, the other pot of money, the ESSER III, the 80%, and the first ESSER II monies, they too can be used for after-school summer and program, wraparound services, transforming a school to a community school. So if your dream is really big and really good, there's funding there from the ESSER funds, and I haven't even mentioned this yet, but in South Carolina, there's also $700 million for childcare. Half of that tends to go for school age. Many schools should be engaged with that funding as well. Okay, I'm about to wrap up here. Let me give you a couple reminders. Ryan mentioned that the law says programs need to be evidence-based. We now have a study that just came out literally today that has tons of evidence that shows that well-designed, well-delivered after-school and summer programs actually do boost reading and math skills, social emotional learning skills, STEM skills, but they can't sit behind a desk and do the same thing more after school and summers. They need to be real life experience, integrated with the arts, physical activities, and just a small list at the bottom. So when you're thinking and dreaming big in your school community for after school and summer, think about these possibilities and more like them. And as Karen has mentioned and Ryan has mentioned, public input, parent input, teacher input, principal input is really important. And in this space in particular, for after school and summer enrichment, The really good opportunities always involve educators, school community groups, and families working together. This isn't always the case, as you well know. So in your school or a set of schools you might work in, please find common ground with some interested educators who really want to do something bold and exciting in summers and after school. Find some community groups, and then go to your superintendent, your school board, and principal, and share your ideas and ask them to put funding behind them. My mother used to always say, if you don't ask, no one else will. Our students and families are depending on you. Thank you so much.
Terry, thank you very much. And I would ask everybody to keep that last line in mind. If you don't ask, no one else will. I think that's such a key point and a great way to segue into our final presentation from our two of our Carolina Family Engagement Center Family Engagement Liaisons, Lorelei Swanson and Julia Beatty. So I'm going to ask them to take it away.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Ryan and Terry and Ms. Robinson-Jones for everything y'all have shared. So I will be beating the same drum, but I want to give you a little bit of context. I am the Upper Central Regional Family Engagement Liaison with the Carolina Family Engagement Center. And on this slide, you see a QR code and an image of a discussion guide. And several of y'all have asked in the chat throughout this meeting, if there is a next step for you as an SIC member or as an SIC, I would encourage you to access this QR code, whether you're joining today live or watching this recording later. That will take you directly to a next step, and it will help facilitate the process for your SIC or a stakeholder group that you might be part of, even if you're not part of an SIC in your community. So I wanted to just let you know a little bit of background to this tool and our process. As I mentioned, I work regionally. I work closely with several schools in the Chester County School District. And last fall, we started having conversations about this CARES Act funding that we had heard about and seen a little bit about in the news. We tried doing a little bit of research to understand how many funds there were, how we might access those for some of the needs that were just being discussed at the school level and the classroom level. But there was a lot of lack of clarity. And so we kind of had our radars scanning the horizon. And then I would say in early January of 2021, came across a little bit of information about ESSER II funds, which had kind of been passed while we were all resting, I think, over the winter break, and started looking into that. And we really started an internal conversation within our office at CFEC about, just what some of our next steps might be. And Lorelei will share a little bit more about that in a few moments. But then in mid-February, the South Carolina Department of Ed provided a helpful webinar to discuss what ESSER II funds were, as well as some of the uses. And then shortly thereafter, the South Carolina School Improvement Office highlighted this opportunity to many of the superintendents and other district leadership. So around this time, I was telling my school stakeholder teams about this funding, that we were trying to understand better what it was. And about a week or so after that webinar, I created an initial user's guide just to help give a little bit of clarity and a framework for what that meant and what it could look like. And then I created a couple of companion Google Forms. And those are really just for us to use informally during regularly scheduled monthly SIC meetings. But what was key is in those meetings, there are multiple perspectives represented. There are community members, there are educators, school level leaders, as well as parents and families. And so as we had those conversations, they were giving feedback about what they were seeing, what they were hearing, what they were noticing. And as time went on, we realized that, in fact, ESSER III funding was now available. And so we started, continuing this conversation over time. And as time went on into the late winter, early spring, some of those administrators and leaders were able to use that information that they'd gotten from their stakeholder teams to develop more strategic assessment and planning as they move towards learning loss recovery, as well as engage with some of the district level leadership as they made plans for this spring and summer. So in May of 2021, with the now ESSER II and ESSER III funds available, we decided to modify and update this initial tool into what you see now, the ESSER Fund Discussion Guide, which gives anyone that wants to access it a brief context and history to what this is. It's an easy to use, family-friendly guide. You can click specific links to take you to dollar amounts that tell you for your district how much you get in ESSER II, how much you get in ESSER III, as well as key questions to consider that your district is very likely trying to answer right now. And then also what those spending categories are, and then additional contact information if you have questions to follow up. So I'd encourage you to access that. And Lorelei is going to give you a few more details about another opportunity that you might use in your community.
Thank you, Julia. Good afternoon. My name is Lorelei Swanson. I am the Upstate Regional Family Engagement Liaison for CFEC, and I work with all schools in Anderson School District 2. I began to build awareness about ESSER funds and the importance of hearing from parents and community leaders in February 2021 by first sharing a letter written by Tom Hudson with all principals in ASD2. This letter encouraged district leaders to invite open dialogue with their SICs to help districts identify vibrant, new and creative thinking while developing their ESSER spending plans. I then reached out to ASD principals personally to encourage them to share our ESSER funds discussion guide with their SICs, and I was invited to speak at all SIC meetings in ASD2 during the month of March to share the guide and build awareness for the importance of sharing stakeholder voice with district leaders regarding ESSER II spending plans. I also met with Lester McCall, the Interim Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and Administrative Services, to have a conversation about strategies for gathering broad scale feedback to inform ESSER II spending plans within ASD2. We talked about the possibility of SICs hosting town hall meetings to discuss questions related to recovering from loss of instructional time and the increased stressors placed on students and families and teachers during this unprecedented time. The district did not believe that they had the capacity at that time to host town hall meetings, but did agree to let me create a Google form to share with ASD2 stakeholders, inviting them to share feedback about the use of ESSER II and now III funds to help students, families, and educators recover from social, emotional, mental health, and academic losses experienced as a result of the pandemic. Finally, through our internal conversations that Julia previously mentioned, we began a collaborative project with myself, Karen Utter, Tom Hudson, and Terry Peterson. We are developing a step-by-step guide to help SICs host stakeholder meetings to promote family and community voice in district and school decision-making on expenditure of COVID relief funds. The guide is currently going through the final edits, and we hope to have it available soon. The QR code and short link on the slide is to a flyer that describes the project. The project guides local SICs in hosting a series of meetings that facilitate a meaningful discussion among their stakeholders about the best way to spend ESSER funds in their school community. The project was developed in the spirit of Governor Dick Riley's town hall meetings that helped build support for the passage of the Education Improvement Act of 1984. The project emphasizes the critical role SICs play by ensuring that all stakeholders are both invited to participate in the discussion process and are representative of the student population of the schools in which they serve. And I will now turn it over to Karen for our Q&A and discussion portion.
Thank you, Julia and Lorelei, for that. And I would really encourage you, all of you who are involved either with SIC or if you're involved with a community group or other group and are just looking for a framework to use we really were just looking for a way to give folks a roadmap on how they might generate input and feedback that they could then share with their districts. So even if you're not an SIC, I think there's a lot of information in those guides that would be of help to you, because while SICs are one way of doing this, we know we need it really to outreach broadly. And so if we do have any of our community partners on today, I really would encourage them to check those resources out as well. So that concludes our presentation portion of the webinar, and we have a couple of questions that have come up. A couple of questions were submitted prior to the webinar, and I think a couple aspects of these have already been answered, but I'm going to put them out there anyway, just to because there may be other folks that would like to rehear some of that information, because I know we packed an awful lot of information into this 1 hour. So one of the questions that came up was, can any of the funds be used for parental caregiver mental health efforts, especially in impoverished communities? Trauma and resilience trainings have been offered to teachers, but not parents. So I'm not sure if they're asking there whether they could, the funds could be used directly for strengthening parent mental health or helping parents to support their children's mental health. But I know, Ryan, that's probably closest to you. I know there's a category of allowable expenditures for mental health.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I would just need to be clarified a little bit about how those services would be carried out. But the category of mental health is so broad in this law that I think anything that really benefits the student, teacher, school community as it relates to mental health would be allowable. But you know, before giving a 100% yes answer, we want to see it a little bit more in a little bit more detail. But yes, I would say mental health services that, you know, serve both parents and students would be an allowable expenditure. It is going to be a big focus of how we spend our state funding, and I know from the feedback we received and from talking with school districts, it's you know, one of the top tier items that they're looking at for using these funds.
Great, thank you. And another question that was submitted prior to the program, and I think I can answer this, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. It asks if the funds are available in equal amounts to each school. It's my understanding that the funds are going to the district, so that it would be up to the district to decide how those would be apportioned between the schools, or is that also a needs-based calculation?
Yep. No, you're correct. It goes to the school districts themselves. So, you know, the school districts could do that calculation and do that on the school level if they wanted to, but I think you'll see most of them take on district level activities rather than that will trickle down to the school level, but I think those decisions are going to be made at the district level. I will say, I don't know if there's anyone from any charter schools on here, but the 2 charter school districts, that's the Charter Institute at Erskine, the South Carolina Public Charter School District, they are also receiving these funds as public schools. And then, of course, those traditional public school districts that serve charter schools are receiving those funds on behalf of the charter school students that they serve. So it is all going to the state and district levels, no one to the individual school levels. So I hope that makes sense.
Definitely. And then there were a couple questions both before the program and then also in the chat that I think went to the sort of the general question of what can we as SIC members do for our school to benefit from these relief funds, and what is the process. And so I hope that the guides that Julia and Lorelei described will be of help to SICs, but just generally speaking, the basic steps, really, there is no real set in stone process. I think finding out really ASAP where your district is, and by asking your principal or asking the principal to ask someone at the district, or if you have contacts at the district office, finding the right person who knows where the district's at with the expenditure of those funds, if finding out they may have already made plans to do town halls or surveys or other efforts to gather feedback, but then once you get that information, going back to your SIC, and it may involve, because of the timelines, you know, I know many SICs don't meet over the summer, most don't in fact, but this may, given the deadlines that are coming up, this may be a situation where SIC chairs and SIC members may need to get together and meet during the summer to try and pull some of this information together. And that could be by holding discussion groups within your SIC. Your SIC could do surveys itself. There are a number of different tools. So I would suggest that, you know, if you want to talk about that further, we can definitely do that through the SC-SIC office or through CFEC. So thank you for those questions.
Absolutely, Kara. Thank you. I think it's one point that was made, and I think we've emphasized it again, is make yourself known. You know, take the lead on this if you need to, and let your school district and your school know that you want to have a voice in this. I think Ryan stated that very, very well. Don't necessarily wait for someone from the district to contact you, but make sure that you're out there and that folks know that you want to be involved in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because your district will appreciate that, because as Ryan said, with the ESSER III, it's a requirement that they have this feedback. So they will appreciate, I believe, your efforts to assist them with that. I see another question that just came up in the chat that I'd like to put out there. And I think this is probably primarily a Ryan question. So given the timeline that has been laid out, I assume it's too late to address the urgent need for summer programming this summer. Could you clarify that the programs you were the possibility of summer programs is for summer 2022? Many parents are concerned and desperate for academic programming this summer.
Sure. So I think you're going to see the majority of school districts, well, maybe not the majority. I think you're going to see, yes, the majority, but not all school districts have summer programs this summer that they were planning to have, you know, using the ESSER II funds before even ESSER III came around. But I think those ESSER III funds that really require the public input, we're going to see those being used for after school and extended learning opportunities this coming school year, and then for summer programs in 2022. So I don't want to say the ship has sailed on, you know, providing input this school year, because I can tell you we require districts to submit academic recovery plans to us. And the note that I got during this meeting was well over 50% were having some type of summer learning program for a large number of students within their district this summer. But there's also a very large focus among all school districts at the start of next school year having after school and extended learning programs in place for not just at-risk students, but for anybody who wants them. So I think you could still advocate for summer programs, but do know that many districts do have those in place this school year. There's an article that came out in Greenville News, 10,000 kids in Greenville have been invited. They've got about 75,000. So you see, you know, a large population of Greenville County, our largest school district, is putting those programs in place. You'll see those announcements coming up a lot, but a lot of districts, you know, are planning and going to be engaging the public for the use of these funds next school year, and really the funds last until 2024. So we've got a considerable amount of time, and it's not, you know, this isn't going to be a one summer program we catch every kid up type approach. This is going to be a multi-year process, and for those kids that were struggling before, it's going to take even more time to get them to where they need to be.
And I would sort of add on to that, and just to clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but I believe that even though some of these deadlines that are sort of quick deadlines coming up for submitting plans, the actual monies, the actual period where those monies can be spent is longer. So if I'm correct, the ESSER II funds have to be committed by September 30, 2023, and the ESSER III funds by September 30, 2024.
Yep, that's exactly correct.
So even though there's this tight turnaround time for submitting plans, they can be, that spending can be spread out over time. And that actually was a question that I had, Ryan, that it looks like the plans could be amended. So if a need came up after a plan is submitted and the district decided that they wanted to reallocate some of those funds, is that a possibility?
Absolutely. And in fact, you know, as long as they're printing money in Washington, D.C., they're going to have to do that. You know, after we got the ESSER I funds, which was a considerable amount of money, 216 million, and then you know, then they passed a 940 million. So that drastically changed what school districts' approaches were to both the ESSER I and the ESSER II, and then of course with ESSER III coming out, you know, they're making changes to ESSER I and ESSER II as well. So absolutely, and the state and school districts are going to have to constantly be evaluating what they're doing, constantly getting public input, and readjusting as things go along. But you know, I know the process is quick, but it's important that they, you know, decide on programs and initiatives that are going to work and that are needed, and of course constantly evaluate and adjust as things come along, and you know, as more funding may come available.
Oh, that's a good point too. And I also wanted to share, in case some folks may have not seen this in the chat, Terry Peterson had given another suggestion for how SICs might approach the process of generating feedback. So he said one way to organize this input would be to convene the chairs of the SIC and others by elementary, middle, and high school levels, and then split the focus into two buckets of work, the in-school improvements and then the summer after-school improvements or startup. So I do think that's a great comment, because you know, there are different needs at those different levels, but then there are some, you want there to be some alignment there, and then looking at what can we do how can we best use classroom or in-school time to support students' learning and development, and then how can we best support learning and development in the summer after-school setting. So I think that's a great approach. And Terry also put some other things in the chat with some of the resources that are out there. And that's really another thing that SICs can do, that we encourage you all to do, is, you know, to be a research arm of your school and your district. You know, an SIC has a lot of freedom in the sense that you can go out and invite different folks to come in and talk about different programs that they have found success with, going out and visiting programs that have a good reputation or that folks seem to think are successful, and seeing what they look like. And then bringing that will help your SIC to not just say, for example, our parents really need access to, you know, quality after care or quality summer programs, but to actually be able to come in and bring some suggestions can really be helpful as well. The one other question we have, and let me just double check so make sure I haven't missed any. There was one question about whether these spending plans, once they're in place, these district spending plans, how the ESSER II and III funds are going to be used. Are those public documents that the public will be able to access online?
Yeah, I can answer that one.
Okay.
And yes, not only should they be, but they're required by federal law to be available on the district's website. And we at the state level are charged with ensuring that that is done. So yes, all the documents, all of the various plans will be available on your school district's website, and we're also planning to make that available on the state website as they're turned into us. And we actually, if you want to go and look and see how your districts have spent ESSER I and ESSER II money, you can scroll back up to those ESSER links, and I can put the ESSER I in here. We do have, it's not an exact, we can't tell you, did they go and buy face masks at CVS, but we can tell you the broad spending categories that they've used these funds so far on. So if you want to see how your district has spent money thus far, we do have those available, and they're, just so you all are aware, they're required to report that quarterly to us. And we can actually go into the system at pretty much any given time and tell you how much money has been spent. So there's some significant oversight and reporting requirements, and we at the state level are trying to be as transparent with these funds as possible. So we're planning to post all of these required plans once they've been reviewed and approved on our website, but they will also by law be required to be displayed on the district website as well.
Great, thank you. And then the last item we had, there was a question in the chat asking if Ms. Robinson-Jones, if she could share her efforts in writing, and that she did some wonderful things that could help our community. And Felicia has said that she could provide some examples today, but also put together a written document for us to share and send out. So Felicia, did you want to share an example or two?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that I found to be a resource in our area, I think it's very helpful that I am from this school district. I'm a proud product of the school district. So I think of the people that have faced different challenges in our various schools in the district, and I like to reach back with those people to bring them up to the present, whatever careers that they have, whatever experiences that they've had. Because to me, I think that helps the students to understand this is something that is doable. Look at what this person has done, and they have come back to reach out for me. And I think that is really wonderful for the community because it builds a strong sense of connectedness. One thing that we're going to hopefully be working on as far as after school programs is use some of the students that we've had in the district. For example, we have someone that graduated from our high school that was in our district schools from kindergarten all the way through high school. She has been a successful federal agent. She's also a successful international singer. We would like to bring her in to help with the arts, to help with career focus, things like that.
Excellent. Excellent, thank you. So I think that covers all the questions that had been submitted. So I want to just, are there any other questions out there that anyone would like to pose to any of our presenters before we close? This was in the chat as well, but we will be posting this video both on and the slides on the Carolina Family Engagement Center website and the South Carolina School Improvement Council website. So you'll be able to access all of this information there. And I really hope that you will share this widely with folks. We found that there hasn't been a huge amount of media coverage on the availability of this funding. And I think there isn't in generally the awareness that we might hope for of how really huge, what a huge amount of money this is. It's a really huge amount of money. And so we really want to try as best we can through SICs, through community groups, through whoever, to really get the word out, to explain to everybody what these funds are and to really encourage folks to participate in this process, because it really has the potential to be able to do great things in our state. We have a list here of presenter contacts in order of appearance. We don't have one for Ms. Robinson Jones, but if you would like to reach out and ask her a question or get her message, you could do that through our liaison, Lorelei Swanson, who is the Regional Family Engagement Liaison for the upstate. So just really want to thank you all for taking the time to join us. And again, we stand ready here at Carolina Family Engagement Center and at the South Carolina School Improvement Council. We are happy to help in whatever way we can, either through technical assistance or advice or materials or more information to help you get started with the process of generating a really broad cross-section of feedback from all education stakeholders. So, and I just see that Ms. Robinson Jones just added her email to the chat, so you can reach out to her that way as well. So with that, I'll just say thank you. Have a good rest of the evening, and thanks to all our presenters for joining us. It was a great presentation, and I know I learned a lot as well. So thank you, and have a good rest of the evening.
Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.